Hey friends, and welcome back to 155 Books. My name is Shannon, and today we've got another video for the Shakespeare series on my channel, and today I wanted to talk about Shakespeare retellings. I will hold my hands up and say the main reason I'm doing this video is to hold myself accountable for the amount that I have on my shelf that are unread. So we're going to go through them in terms of the good, the bad, and the unread. I have actually only got one good one, two bad ones, and the rest are all unread, but like I say, this video is to hold myself accountable and obviously share with you how many Shakespeare retellings I have on my shelves, whether I've read them or not. So we're going to start off with the good, because any chance I get to talk about this book I will, because I loved it so much, and that is Enter the Body by Joy McCullough. When you say retelling, and I think that's probably why I've enjoyed this more than any of the other retellings I've read, is a retelling of a completely different sort. It essentially takes some of the main female characters from the different Shakespeare plays and puts them all in a sort of trapdoor scenario underneath a stage, and they all start communicating with each other and telling their stories to one another, and the way in which the main three tell their stories is sometimes very different to what you read in the Shakespeare play. So the three main people whose stories you get are Juliet, who was done very well as you read it, and she comes across as very young and silly, but that's the point, because obviously you don't realise actually how young she is in Romeo and Juliet, and this kind of brings that to the fore. You have Cordelia from King Lear. If you watched my previous video of my Shakespeare rankings, then you will know that Cordelia is my favourite character in all of the Shakespeare plays I've read so far, and this just made that very obvious to me. She was just so wronged. She was wronged so much. And I really enjoyed what the author did with Cordelia's story in this. And I think the reason why I love Cordelia so much is because despite everything, she never changed her morals. Her morals stay the same throughout King Lear, and that's kind of what the author plays with in this, and it kind of stays true to her character, and like I say, it really made it obvious to me why she's my favourite character of all of the females in the different Shakespeare plays. I can't remember who the third person is. Oh, of course. And the third one is Ophelia from Hamlet. And then what happens is they then get to sort of retell their stories in an aspect of someone asks, well, if it didn't have to be that way, how would your story turn out? And when they retell them, it's not quite what you expect, and then there's some conversation about that at the end, and it's just really, really cleverly done. However, I read this before I read Titus Andronicus, and I really need to reread it after reading Titus Andronicus, especially because now it's one of my favourite Shakespeare plays, because Lavinia is in this. And again, the way the author puts Lavinia in this book, I think is probably why reading Titus Andronicus was so cutthroat for me and so devastating. And I know rereading this, I'm going to be devastated even more. Oh, it's horrific. It is horrific. Yeah, so it's basically reclaiming as well, sort of violence against women. It really, really sort of concentrates on that. I would definitely check out the content warnings, because this isn't an easy one to read. I think it has content warnings in the front of it. No, it doesn't have content warnings in it, which I'm quite surprised about. I kind of feel like this was the kind of book where the author would have chosen to do that. So yes, but this is great, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone who enjoys the Shakespeare plays and, would like to see a different perspective on some of the female characters. So we are already onto the bad section. There's only 2 books in this section, because like I say, I've only read 3 Shakespeare retellings. When I say bad, they're not bad. I did enjoy them. However, again, they weren't really what I was expecting, or I didn't love them. So the first one I want to talk about is The Gap of Time by Jeanette Winterson, and this is a retelling of The Winter's Tale. Again, I read this before reading The Winter's Tale. I haven't read The Winter's Tale yet, so it will be very interesting to read the play and maybe reread this. It's been a very long time since I've reread this, or since I've read this to begin with. One thing that Jeanette Winterson does really well is at the beginning there is a synopsis of The Winter's Tale, so even if you haven't read it, you do know the story going into the retelling. I think the thing that I was most confused about with this was I thought it was dystopian. I think it is dystopian. See, it's very confusing. I don't know if this place actually exists. It's set in the American city of New Bohemia. My geography is terrible, so if that actually exists, then I'm terrible. I think I was reading this in my mind in a sort of like futuristic kind of world, and actually I think it's just set in the normal day. So again, rereading it, I think that might help with my understanding of it. I don't really know what the point of this was, other than I can see why Jeanette Winterson decided to do a retelling of The Winter's Tale, because there's a lot of themes in The Winter's Tale that Jeanette Winterson writes about anyway. So obviously adoption is a big one. Again, I would definitely check the content warnings for this, because there is a sexual assault that happens that I was not expecting. So I think this one could have been great, but it was a lot of things I wasn't really expecting, and I didn't really know what it was trying to do, whether it was, like I say, what era it was set in, what genre it was. The content warnings would have been helpful. Yes. I have kept this, however, so obviously I enjoyed it enough to think that I'm probably going to reread it at some point. Obviously it's Jeanette Winterson, the writing was beautiful. And there are still some bits that stick out in my mind. But like I say, I think I finished it and I kind of thought I didn't really know what the point was. And I guess that was kind of my problem. Or that is my problem with the retellings, as you will see. So the next book on the bad list is one that I actually finished kind of recently, and that is Lady Macbeth by Eva Reid. Again, I did enjoy reading this, but it was trying to do too many things, kind of like The Gap of Time, possibly, to the point where at the end I was a bit like, what was the point of that entire thing? So to me, a retelling, especially with the myth retellings, which I do enjoy a lot of the time, again, they're feminist, and they try to retell a certain character's story, which is kind of what I was expecting from this. And it doesn't really do that. Yeah, I don't know what Ava Reid was trying to do with this, because like I say, there were so many things that were happening. However, there was a beautiful, beautiful man in this book that isn't in the Shakespeare plays, that definitely added to it. And if it wasn't for Lysander, I would have been very bored. Very, very, very bored. I was basically reading it just for him, because I kind of knew that there was going to be a sort of like love story there. I really enjoyed that aspect of it, I've got to say. Having Lady Macbeth have like somebody else that she could focus on. There's quite a few people or men in this novel that she interacts with that I was a bit like, is this flirty? Is this you using your feminine wiles as you are known to do? Yeah. So again, just a kind of a mixed bag. Still glad that I read it. Don't think I would reread it. Another thing that was very confusing was the writing. I kind of thought it read a little bit like YA. However, the content in this is definitely not young adult, so please do not get confused with that. Yeah, so again, just a mixed bag. Enjoyable, but wouldn't reread it. One thing I would like to say at this point is, thankfully, with the ones that I have read, I haven't given up. I did think while I was reading Lady Macbeth that the retellings weren't going to be for me and I would have to give up on them. The pacing as well is sometimes a little bit confusing. I've mentioned this, I think, before, in that obviously the plays are very fast paced a lot of the time because it's a Shakespeare play and it's performed in a certain time frame. Turning that into a book sometimes, does cause problems with the pacing. Lady Macbeth isn't a long book, it's just over 300 pages, and yet I felt like the first half was so boring and slow because nothing was happening. And I think that might continue to be a problem with the retellings. And I think that is definitely an issue I've heard of for at least one of the retellings I do have on my TBR. So now we are going to get into the unread, and I've got quite a few, and I've got a mixture of unread retellings. So let's get started. So the first one I want to talk about is definitely one I would count as a retelling. These do count as retellings, and I think they're really important even for adults to read and enjoy, especially if you enjoy Shakespeare, and that is the ones that are retold for children. So I've got this beautiful hardback bind up written by Michael Morpurgo, who's like one of my favourite childhood authors, and it's called Tales from Shakespeare, and there's an introduction by Benedict Cumberbatch. So literally it's everything I love in a book. It's got Shakespeare, it's got Michael Morpurgo, it's got Benedict Cumberbatch. What's not to love? So this one has obviously got a lot of is sort of like the timeless collection. There is one in here of a Shakespeare play that I have not read yet, so I would like to read this before I get to that Shakespeare play, because I do like to know the story before going into them, because it does make it easier. And again, that's one thing I would say for people who want to get into Shakespeare, is read a children's retelling first, because it essentially gives you all the information you need to know about the story, and then you can read the play and be like, oh yeah, I can see where this is joining up now. So it's also got illustrations from a group of different people, which is very exciting, and I'm just going to put the microphone down so I can show you. The end pages in this are absolutely gorgeous. I just wanted to quickly go through the tales. So obviously you've got A Midsummer Night's Dream, The Tempest, which I haven't read, The Taming of the Shrew, which I'll be interested to read, as it's obviously not my favourite Shakespeare play, King Lear, Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, The Winter's Tale, which again I'll probably read before I read the actual play, Macbeth, Henry V, and Twelfth Night. So there are there are 4 tales in here that I haven't actually read the play for, so that's going to be really, really helpful for when I do get around to reading them. And like I say, I just love beautiful books like this, and I'm really intrigued to see how Michael Morpurgo, whose writing I love so much, writes these Shakespeare plays. Next we have got 2 books. It's a fantasy duology by Chloe Gong, and I was given these from my very good friend Sylvie, who has read them, and they are signed by the author, and they are hardbacks, and I'm very excited about them. And obviously they are These Violent Delights and Our Violent Ends. These are obviously a fantasy duology kind of retelling of Romeo and Juliet set in Shanghai. Yes, the year is 1926. I've just seen the back of this. The back is gorgeous. I've not looked at the back before. I really want to just read this now. The year is 1926 and Shanghai hums to the tune of debauchery. And I have heard really good things about this. Yeah, I just want to read this now. I just want to read it now. I want to read it now. The back of this one is absolutely gorgeous as well, and this one's got sprayed edges. I just want to read them. I want to read them now. Yes, I do. So we've got 3 left, and the rest in this list are all proper retellings, if that makes sense, like actual retellings, proper retellings. I don't know if that's how you would describe them. Self-proclaimed retellings. The first of those is also a Romeo and Juliet retelling called Fair Rosaline. I can never remember if it's Rosalind or Rosaline. Which is obviously the story of Romeo and Juliet from Rosaline's perspective, and I've heard really good things about this one, so I'm very, very excited. And it just says at the top, before Romeo loved Juliet, he loved Fair Rosaline. So I'm excited. I am excited, but also I don't want them to hate on Romeo. I can see why you would. It's very easy to do that. I don't know if I'm going to like it. So I think I need to read this when I'm in the mood to hate Romeo. not sure when that's going to be. The next one is another Macbeth retelling, and that is Lady Macbethed. This one came out before Lady Macbeth, and I've heard mixed things about this. I've heard generally that a lot of people have enjoyed this. However, their main issue with it is it's historically inaccurate because of when it's set. I know one of my best friends from university, obviously we studied archaeology, had an issue with the historical inaccuracies. I usually can read books and kind of gloss over that. It depends how obvious and bad it is. So in my mind I'm kind of thinking, will I even know what these historical inaccuracies are for it to bother me or not? So like I say, I think I would be able to read this and gloss over that, which means that hopefully I will enjoy this one. I have also been told by Charlotte from Coiny Reads that Macbeth basically isn't in this at all, or he's barely in it, he's just like right at the end. And I don't know how to feel about that. Does it mean it's a retelling from her birth? Because after reading Lady Macbeth, I'm not entirely sure I can deal with that. I really hope the pacing is better and it's not boring. So yes, I'm hoping I enjoy this one. I think I will enjoy it more than Lady Macbeth, but again, it's going to be a while, I think, until I pick this one up because I've just read that. And the last one on my unread list is Hagseed by Margaret Atwood, and this is a retelling of The Tempest. Yes, it's a retelling of The Tempest, which is a play I have not read. So what I will probably do is when I get round to The Tempest chronologically, or when I get round to it generally, I will probably pick this one up straight afterwards. This is part of the same series that The Gap of Time was a part of, where a lot of these popular authors did Shakespeare retellings, so there are a few more of these, which I would also like to check out. I think Ali Smith did one. Yeah, so I'm hoping, again, this one seems quite like bigger than The Gap of Time. I don't know if that's because this is a hardback. I haven't heard anything at all about this. I do think The Tempest as a play I will enjoy, which hopefully means I will enjoy this retelling. If you've read this or you've read The Tempest and have really enjoyed it, please let me know so I can hopefully pick those up sooner. So those are all of the retellings that I have read and all of the many retellings I have on my TBR. I would say the majority of my TBR is retellings, like Shakespeare retellings, because I've actually only got 61 books on my TBR, so a good chunk of that is Shakespeare retellings. I just basically need to stop buying them. That's the problem. A new one gets released and I'm like, oh, I'll buy that, and it just sits on my shelf for years. Having said that, if you do have any recommendations of retellings, Shakespeare retellings that you've enjoyed, I know Mona someone did one. I think it was called All's Well. I also want to buy and read that because it looks beautiful, but I really want the hardback, which I think is out of production now because the hardback is beautiful. Or if you'd be interested in seeing me do a reading vlog maybe with a couple of these retellings, because obviously that would help get some of them off my TBR, and if it was something that you enjoyed that we could do for the Shakespeare series, then that's great too. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you soon in my next video. Bye!